The stranger appeared at Garrett Thorne's door just as the first drops of rain began to fall, her green skin pale with exhaustion, and her clothes torn in places that spoke of hard travel through unforgiving country. Garrett had been a soldier once, had fought in the border wars where orcs and humans clashed over disputed territory, and his hand went instinctively to the hunting knife at his belt before his mind caught up with what his eyes were seeing. This orc woman was alone, unarmed, and looked like she had not eaten in days. "I mean no harm," she said quickly, her voice rough but steady despite the way she swayed on her feet. "I only ask for shelter from the storm. I can work. 1 day of labor for a roof and a meal." Garrett stood in the doorway of his modest farmhouse, looking at her in the fading light. She was tall, nearly his own height, with broad shoulders and muscular arms that spoke of hard physical work. Her tusks were small, barely protruding from her lower lip, and her dark hair hung in a tangled braid down her back. Her eyes were amber, catching the last rays of sunlight, and they held a mixture of pride and desperation that he recognized from his own reflection in darker times. Behind him, the house was warm. He had a fire going, stew cooking, and more space than one man needed. The rain was beginning to fall harder, and the sky promised a night of storms. He thought of the orc raiders he had fought, the villages they had burned, the friends he had lost. He thought of the treaties that had been signed, the peace that was supposed to exist now, and how fragile that peace was. "What kind of work can you do?" he asked finally. Relief flickered across her face, quickly suppressed. "Anything. I am strong. I can chop wood, repair fences, clear land. I worked on farms in the Northern Territories before I had to leave." "Why did you have to leave?" She hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "I refused to raid human settlements. My clan said I was a coward and cast me out. I have been traveling south for 3 weeks, looking for work, for a place that will accept me. Most humans run when they see me, or worse." The rain was coming down hard now, and Garrett made his decision. 1 day of work, then. "You can sleep in the barn tonight, and tomorrow you will help me finish repairing the north pasture fence. The posts need to be set deep before winter comes." "Thank you," she said, and there was genuine gratitude in her voice that made something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He pointed toward the barn, a sturdy structure that he had built himself 2 years ago when he first claimed this land. "There is dry hay in the loft and blankets in the storage chest. I will bring you food." She nodded and turned away, walking toward the barn with her shoulders hunched against the rain. Garrett watched her go, then closed the door and stood for a moment in the warmth of his home, wondering if he had just made a terrible mistake or the first decent decision in a long time. He ladled stew into a bowl, cut a thick slice of bread, and found an apple that was still crisp despite being weeks old. He put it all on a tray with a mug of water and carried it out to the barn, ducking his head against the driving rain. The barn smelled of hay and animals, comfortable and familiar. He found the orc woman in the loft, sitting on a pile of hay with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "I did not catch your name," Garrett said, setting the tray beside her. "Elara Jormak," she replied, looking at the food with obvious hunger but not immediately reaching for it. "And you are Garrett Thorne. This is my land, about 60 acres. I grow wheat, keep some chickens and a few goats. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is more than nothing," Elara said quietly. "That is more than most people have." He nodded and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the ladder. "Why did you let me stay? You are a soldier." "I can see it in the way you stand, the way you assessed me as a threat before you saw me as a person. You have fought my kind before." Garrett looked back at her, this green-skinned woman with her amber eyes and her proud, tired face. "The war is over, and you asked for work, not charity." There is honor in that. He climbed down the ladder and returned to his house, but sleep was a long time coming that night. He lay in his bed listening to the storm rage outside and thought about the wars, about the orc warriors he had faced in battle, about the treaties and the uneasy peace. He thought about being alone on this farm, about the work that was always more than one person could manage, about the winters that were long and the spring plantings that came too fast. When dawn broke gray and still damp from the night's rain, Garrett rose and made breakfast. He cooked more than usual, then carried a plate out to the barn. Elara was already awake, folding the blankets neatly and stacking them back in the storage chest. She had braided her hair more tightly and washed her face with water from the rain barrel. "Good morning," he said, offering her the plate. "Eggs and bacon. You will need the energy for fence work." She took the plate with a nod of thanks and ate quickly but not greedily, with the efficiency of someone who had gone hungry often enough to know not to waste food. When she was finished, she returned the plate and followed him out to the north pasture. The fence line stretched for nearly a quarter mile, and a storm 2 weeks earlier had knocked down several sections. Garrett had managed to clear the debris and set some new posts, but the work was slow going alone. With Elara's help, it went faster. She was as strong as she had claimed, driving posts into the still soft earth with powerful swings of the mallet, holding rails steady while he secured them with nails. They worked in silence at first, the kind of comfortable quiet that came from shared labor. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, and the day turned warm despite the earlier rain. Garrett found himself watching her work, noting the way she moved with purpose and skill, the way she checked each post to make sure it was straight and solid before moving to the next one. "You have done this before," he observed around mid-morning. "My father was a builder," Elara said, not looking up from her work. "Before he became a war chief, he built homes and fortifications. He taught me that anything worth doing is worth doing properly." "What happened to him?" "He died in the last year of the war, killed by human soldiers during the siege of Karak Hold." She said it without inflection, but Garrett heard the grief underneath. "I am sorry," he said, and meant it. She looked at him then, surprise evident in her eyes. "You do not need to apologize." "You did not kill him." "No, but my people did. And I have killed orcs in battle. The war left scars on both our kinds." Elara was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, it did. But the war is over now, and we must find a way to live with those scars." They continued working, and as the morning wore into afternoon, they began to talk more. Garrett told her about buying this land with his soldiers' pay, about the dream of building something that was his own, something that was not about fighting or killing. Elara told him about growing up in the northern mountains, about learning to hunt and fight and build, about the slow realization that she did not want to spend her life raiding and warring. "My clan said I was weak," she said, as they paused to drink water from the canteen he had brought. "They said I had lost the warrior's spirit, but I do not think refusing to kill innocent people is weakness. I think it is strength." "I agree," Garrett said. "I have seen what war does. I have done things in battle that haunt me. When the treaties were signed, I was glad. I thought maybe there was a chance for something better." "And is there a chance for something better?" He looked at his farm, at the fields he had planted and harvested, at the house he had built with his own hands. "I think so. It is hard work and lonely sometimes, but it is mine. It is not perfect, but it is better than war." By late afternoon, they had finished the fence line. Garrett stood back and surveyed their work with satisfaction. What would have taken him another week to complete alone was done in a single day. The fence was straight and strong, ready to stand against the winter weather. "Good work," he said to Elara. "You have more than earned your keep." She nodded, but there was something in her expression that was difficult to read. Then I will go now. I have kept my side of the bargain. Garrett opened his mouth to agree, then stopped. He looked at his farm, at all the work that still needed to be done before winter. He thought about the long evenings alone, about eating meals by himself and having no one to talk to except the animals. He thought about Elara walking away into the wilderness, looking for another farm, another door, another person who might not turn her away. Or you could stay longer, he heard himself say. Not for free. I would pay you. The harvest is coming soon and there is more work than I can manage alone. I could use the help and you need a place to stay while you look for something more permanent. Elara studied him carefully, her amber eyes searching his face. You would trust me, an orc. You have proven yourself trustworthy, and I need help. This seems like a fair arrangement for both of us. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I will stay for the harvest, but I will work for my keep and my pay. I will not be a burden. I would not expect you to be, Garrett said, and felt something that might have been relief settle in his chest. That evening he made dinner for two and invited Elara into the house. She hesitated at the threshold, clearly not accustomed to being welcomed into a human home, but eventually stepped inside. She looked around the single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, taking in the simple furniture, the fireplace, the shelves of books that Garrett had collected over the years. You have many books, she observed. I taught myself to read after I left the army. It helps pass the long winter evenings. We did not have books in my clan. Knowledge was passed down through stories and songs. Can you read? She shook her head. I never learned. An idea occurred to him, spontaneous and a little reckless. I could teach you if you like. In the evenings after the work is done. Elara looked at him with an expression he could not quite decipher. Why would you do that? Why not? You are here, I have books, and it seems a shame not to share them. She considered this, then nodded. I would like that, thank you. They ate together, and Garrett found himself enjoying the company more than he had anticipated. Elara had a dry sense of humor, and a way of looking at the world that was different from his own, but not incompatible. They talked about the farm, about the work that needed to be done, about the approaching harvest season. After dinner, true to his word, Garrett pulled out a primer he had used when teaching himself and began to show Elara the letters. She was a quick learner, absorbing the information with fierce concentration. They worked until the candles burned low, then Garrett walked her out to the barn. Thank you, she said again at the barn door. For the food, the work, the lessons, I have not been shown such kindness in a long time. You are earning your keep, Garrett said. There is no need to thank me. But as he walked back to the house, he knew that was not entirely true. He could have hired help from the nearby village, could have found human laborers to assist with the harvest. He had chosen to let Elara stay, and he was not entirely sure why. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. They rose with the sun and worked through the morning on various projects around the farm. Garrett was preparing for the harvest, sharpening tools, repairing the wagon, checking the storage barn for leaks. Elara worked alongside him, her strength and skill making every task easier. In the afternoons, they often worked separately, Garrett attending to the animals while Elara worked on projects she had identified herself, repairs and improvements that he had been putting off for lack of time or energy. In the evenings, they ate together and then continued the reading lessons. Elara was progressing quickly, already able to sound out simple words and recognize common letters. She approached learning with the same focused determination she brought to physical labor, and Garrett found himself looking forward to these quiet hours by lamplight. One evening, after they had been working through a children's book of fables, Elara looked up from the page with a thoughtful expression. This story about the crow and the pitcher, it is about using intelligence instead of strength. Do you think humans see orcs as lacking intelligence? Garrett considered the question carefully. Some do. They see the strength and the warrior culture and assume that is all there is. But anyone who has fought against orcs knows better. Your kind are skilled strategists and tacticians. The war went on as long as it did because both sides were intelligent and adaptable. And yet the stories humans tell about orcs are all about savagery and violence. The stories orcs tell about humans are probably not flattering either, Garrett pointed out. Elara smiled slightly, her tusks catching the lamplight. No, they are not. We are told that humans are weak and treacherous, that they cannot be trusted, that they will smile at you while planning your destruction. And yet here you are, trusting me. And here you are, trusting me, she countered. Perhaps we are both fools. Or perhaps the stories are wrong, Garrett said quietly. Something shifted in the air between them, a moment of understanding that went deeper than words. Elara held his gaze for a long moment, then looked back down at the book, her voice slightly rough as she continued to read. The harvest season arrived, and the farm became a flurry of activity. Garrett's wheat was ready, the golden grain heavy on the stalks, and there was a narrow window of good weather to bring it in. They worked from dawn until well past dusk, cutting and bundling and hauling the sheaves to the barn. It was back-breaking work, made bearable only by Elara's strength and tireless effort. On the third day of harvest, a wagon rolled up the road to Garrett's farm. He recognized the driver as Thomas Winters, a farmer from the next property over, a man he had traded work with in the past. Thomas pulled his wagon to a stop and climbed down, his eyes going wide when he saw Elara standing beside Garrett in the field. "Thorne," Thomas said carefully, "did not know you were keeping an orc." "Elara is working for me," Garrett said, his voice level, "helping with the harvest." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "People in the village have been talking. They have seen her around your property. Some are not happy about it." "Some people are never happy about anything," Garrett replied. "Elara has done good work, caused no trouble. I do not see what concern it is to anyone else." "Just thought you should know. There has been talk of maybe coming out here, making sure everything is all right." Garrett felt a flash of anger but kept his voice calm. "Everything is fine. If anyone from the village wants to check on me, they are welcome to come during daylight and knock on my door like civilized people. But I will not have anyone harassing my worker." Thomas nodded slowly, clearly not wanting to get involved further. "Fair enough. Just wanted to warn you. And to say that if you need help bringing in the harvest, me and my boys can lend a hand. Always did before. I appreciate the offer, but we have it under control." After Thomas left, Elara spoke quietly. "I am causing you trouble. Perhaps I should go." "No," Garrett said firmly. "You have done nothing wrong. People fear what they do not understand, and they have been taught to fear orcs. But you are not staying here for their approval. You are staying because we have an agreement, and I keep my agreements." They returned to work, but the incident had cast a shadow over the day. Garrett found himself angry at the narrow-mindedness of his neighbors, at the way they could not see past old prejudices. He had fought in the war, had seen the worst of what both sides could do, and he had come to believe that the only way forward was to look beyond those old hatreds. That night, as they sat down to dinner, Elara was quieter than usual. Garrett let her have her silence for a while, then spoke. "What are you thinking about?" "About whether I will ever find a place where I belong," she said. "I do not fit with my clan anymore, but I do not fit in human society either. I am caught between two worlds, belonging to neither." "I know something about that," Garrett said. "I left the army, left that life behind, but I do not quite fit in with the farmers and villagers either." They see me as the soldier, the man who has killed, who has seen things they cannot imagine. Sometimes I think we are all caught between worlds in one way or another. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Elara asked, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. Maybe. Or maybe it is supposed to help you see that you are not as alone as you think. She looked at him across the table, and something in her expression made his heart beat faster. Thank you, Garrett, for seeing me as a person, not just an orc. It means more than you know. The harvest continued, and despite the warning from Thomas, no one from the village came to cause trouble. Garrett and Elara worked side by side, bringing in the wheat and storing it safely in the barn. It was a good harvest, better than Garrett had managed alone in previous years, and he knew it was because of Elara's help. As autumn progressed, the days grew shorter and cooler. Garrett knew he should be thinking about what would happen when the season ended, when Elara would presumably move on to find other work. But he found himself avoiding the subject, telling himself it was because she was such good help, that it made practical sense to keep her on through the winter. The truth, which he was beginning to admit to himself in quiet moments, was that he did not want her to leave. He had grown accustomed to her presence, to having someone to talk to in the evenings, to sharing meals and work and the simple rhythms of daily life. The farm felt less lonely with her there, and he found himself happier than he had been in years. One evening in late autumn, as they sat by the fire reading together, Elara suddenly closed her book and looked at him. "I need to ask you something. What is it? Why did you really let me stay?" "Beyond the work, beyond the practical reasons. Why did you take that chance?" Garrett was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "When I came back from the war, I was tired of fighting and hating and killing. I wanted to build something instead of destroying. But I found that building a life is harder than I expected. It is not just about the physical work. It is about connection, about having something beyond just survival. When you showed up at my door, I saw someone who was also trying to build a different life, someone who had chosen something harder than what was expected. I respected that, and I was lonely. I did not realize how lonely until you were here, and suddenly I was not anymore." Elara was very still, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "I was lonely too. I have been lonely since I left my clan, since I chose to walk a different path. Being here, working with you, it is the first time in months that I have felt like maybe I could have a future, a real one, not just wandering from place to place looking for work." "Then stay," Garrett said, the words coming out before he could think them through. "Not just for the winter. Stay. Be my partner in this farm. We work well together, and I think we could build something good here." "As your worker?" Elara asked carefully. "As my equal," Garrett replied. "This would be as much your farm as mine. We would share the work and the profits and the decisions." Elara looked away, and he could see the conflict on her face. "Garrett, you must know that if I stay, if we continue like this, people will talk. They already are. It will get worse. And I think you must also know that my feelings for you have become more than just gratitude or friendship. I did not mean for it to happen, but it has." Garrett's heart was pounding now. "My feelings have changed too. I find myself thinking about you when we are apart, looking forward to our evenings together, dreading the thought of you leaving. I know what people will say, what they will think. But I do not care anymore. I spent years doing what I was supposed to do, fighting the wars I was told to fight, hating the enemies I was told to hate. I am done living my life for other people's expectations." She turned back to him, hope and fear warring in her expression. "If we do this, there is no going back. We will both be outcasts. Your neighbors will turn against you. My people, if they find out, will consider me a traitor not just to the clan but to the race." "I know," Garrett said. "And I am saying I do not care. I want you to stay, Elara." Not as my worker, not as my partner in the farm, but as more than that. I want you in my life permanently in every way that matters." For a long moment she did not move or speak. Then she stood and crossed the room to him, and he rose to meet her. They stood face to face, and he could see the tears gathering in her eyes even as she smiled. "I want that too," she whispered. "More than I have wanted anything in a long time." He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight roughness of her tusks against his palms. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, and then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when she kissed him back, it deepened into something more, something that spoke of loneliness ending and futures beginning. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Elara rested her forehead against his, her strong arms wrapped around him. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We live," Garrett said simply. "We work the farm, we build our life, and we do not let anyone tell us it is wrong." That night, Elara did not return to the barn. She stayed in the house, and they talked long into the night about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. They made plans for the farm, for expanding the fields, for maybe getting some cattle in the spring. They talked about the challenges they would face, the prejudice they would encounter, and how they would handle it together. As winter set in, Garrett and Elara settled into their new relationship. It was not without its awkward moments, the adjustments that any two people must make when joining their lives. Elara moved her few possessions from the barn into the house, and they rearranged the space to accommodate both of them. Garrett built a larger bed, and Elara sewed new curtains and cushions, adding touches of comfort to the previously Spartan dwelling. They continued to work the farm together, preparing for winter and making plans for spring. Elara proved to have a talent for animal husbandry, and under her care, the chickens produced more eggs and the goats gave more milk. Garrett taught her more about farming techniques, about crop rotation and soil management, and she contributed her own knowledge of building and repair. The people of the village kept their distance. Some were openly hostile when Garrett came to town for supplies, muttering about orc lovers and race traders. Others were simply cold, no longer offering the casual greetings and small talk that had been normal before. Thomas Winters was one of the few who remained civil, though even he kept his distance more than before. Garrett found he did not mind as much as he might have expected. He had Elara, and that was enough. They were building something together, something that felt more real and valuable than the approval of people who could not see past their prejudices. One particularly cold afternoon in deep winter, Garrett returned from checking the fences to find Elara sitting by the fire, staring into the flames with a troubled expression. He hung up his coat and joined her, taking her hand in his. "What is wrong?" he asked. "I was thinking about the future," she said slowly. "About what happens next. We have this winter together, and that is wonderful. But what about next year and the year after that? What kind of life can we really have together? We cannot marry, not legally. Any children we might have would be ostracized by both our peoples. How do we build a lasting future when the world is set against us?" Garrett was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. "I will not lie and say it will be easy. It will not be, but people have faced harder things and survived. The world is changing slowly. The war ended, the treaties were signed. Maybe in time attitudes will change too, and even if they do not, we will have each other. We will have this farm, this life we are building. Is that not enough?" "I want it to be enough," Elara said, "but I am afraid. I am afraid that one day you will regret this choice, that the cost of being with me will be too high." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Listen to me. I have made many choices in my life, some good, some terrible. I have killed men in battle. I have watched friends die. I have done things that haunt me. Choosing to be with you is not one of the choices I will ever regret. You are the best thing that has happened to me. Whatever challenges come, we will face them together." She held him tightly, and he felt the tension slowly leave her body. "Together," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Winter deepened, bringing heavy snows that blanketed the farm and isolated them from the outside world. Garrett and Elara spent long days inside, working on indoor projects and reading by the fire. Garrett continued Elara's reading lessons, and she was now able to work through more complex texts. She particularly enjoyed books about far-off places, about lands where different peoples lived together without the prejudices that divided their own world. On the longest night of winter, they held their own private celebration. Garrett cooked a special meal, using carefully hoarded ingredients, and they opened a bottle of wine that he had been saving. They exchanged gifts, Garrett giving Elara a hand-bound journal for her to practice her writing, and Elara giving him a carved wooden figure of a hawk that she had made during her long hours in the barn before they had become a couple. "I made this when I first arrived," she told him. "I was carving to keep my hands busy, to distract myself from my uncertain future. The hawk represented freedom to me, the ability to soar above the divisions and conflicts of the ground. I want you to have it now, to remind you of what we are building together." Garrett held the carving carefully, admiring the skill and care that had gone into it. "It is beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for staying, for taking a chance on this uncertain future with me." "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay," Elara replied. As winter began to release its grip, and the first signs of spring appeared, Garrett and Elara started planning for the coming season. They decided to expand the cultivated area, adding another field for barley and increasing the vegetable garden. Elara wanted to try raising pigs, having learned the techniques from her father, and Garrett agreed it was a good diversification of their livestock. But their planning was interrupted one afternoon when Thomas Winters rode up to the farm, his expression grim. Garrett and Elara went out to meet him, and Garrett felt a knot of worry form in his stomach at the look on Thomas's face. "What is wrong?" Garrett asked. "There was a raid last night," Thomas said, "on the Morrison farm about 10 miles east of here. A band of orcs came down from the mountains, burned their barn, killed some of their livestock. No one was hurt, but people are scared and angry." Garrett felt Elara tense beside him. "Was it the Jormak clan?" she asked quietly. Thomas shook his head. "Do not know. The Morrisons said they did not recognize the markings. But it does not matter to most people. Orcs are orcs to them. There is talk in the village about forming a militia, about going into the mountains and clearing out any orc settlements they find." "That would violate the treaty," Garrett said sharply. "It would restart the war." "I know that, and you know that, but people are frightened and looking for someone to blame. And I am sorry to say, Thorne, but some of that anger is being directed at you. There are people saying you brought this on by harboring an orc, that you have made the whole area a target." Garrett felt fury rise in his chest, but before he could speak, Elara laid a hand on his arm. "Thomas is right, Garrett. My presence here may be putting you in danger. I should go." "No," Garrett said firmly. "You had nothing to do with this raid. You have been here with me working this farm. The people responsible are the raiders, not you." "But people will not see it that way," Elara said. "They will see an orc, and that is all. If staying here puts you in danger, I cannot do it." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "I did not come here to drive her away, Thorne. I came to warn you, but she might be right about the danger. There are some hot heads in the village who might decide to come out here and cause trouble." "Let them come," Garrett said coldly. "I defended this land from raiders before, human and orc both. I can do it again." "Just be careful," Thomas said, And watch your back. Not everyone is your enemy, but you have fewer friends than you used to." He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Garrett and Elara standing in the yard. "I should leave," Elara said again, her voice thick with emotion. "I cannot let you be hurt because of me." "If you leave, it will not fix anything," Garrett argued. "The raiders will still have attacked that farm. The people will still be angry and afraid, and I will have lost you, which is unacceptable. We face this together, or we do not face it at all." They spent the next few days in tense watchfulness. Garrett retrieved his old sword from where it had been stored in the back of a closet, oiling the blade and checking the edge. Elara revealed that she had a bow and a quiver of arrows hidden among her possessions, and they set up a practice target behind the barn. She was an excellent archer, hitting the target consistently even at long range. "My father taught me," she explained. "He said every orc should know how to hunt and fight, even if they chose not to make war their life." They heard nothing more about the raid or about any plans from the village, but the tension did not ease. Then, nearly a week after Thomas's warning, Garrett was working in the barn when he heard Elara call out from the house. Her voice was sharp with alarm, and he grabbed his sword and ran. He found her standing at the front window, looking out at the road. A group of men was approaching, about a dozen of them, all armed with clubs and farming tools. Garrett recognized several faces from the village, including Marcus Fletcher, the blacksmith, who seemed to be leading them. "Stay inside," Garrett told Elara, then walked out to meet them. He stopped at the edge of his property, his sword hanging loose in his hand but clearly visible. "That is far enough," he called out. "State your business." Marcus stopped, the others fanning out behind him. "We have come for the orc, Thorne. After the raid on Morrison's place, we cannot have one living among us. Hand her over and we will leave you in peace." "No," Garrett said flatly. "Elara has done nothing wrong. She was here with me when that raid happened. She has been here for months, working this farm and causing no trouble. You have no right to demand anything from me or her." "She is an orc," another man called out. "Her kind attacked Morrison. We cannot trust any of them. So because some orcs committed a crime, all orcs are guilty." Garrett shot back. "By that logic, every human is responsible for every crime committed by any human. It is guilt by association, and it is unjust. The law says we have the right to expel any orc from human territory if they pose a threat," Marcus said, though he looked uncomfortable. "And who decides if she poses a threat? You, a mob with clubs. There is a proper legal process and you are not following it. Get off my land." The men shifted uneasily, clearly not having expected such strong resistance. Then one of them, a young man Garrett vaguely recognized from the village, stepped forward. "You have gone soft, Thorne. Too much time spent with the orc. Maybe you need to be reminded which side you are on." The young man swung his club and Garrett moved. Years of military training took over, and he sidestepped the swing easily, bringing the flat of his sword around to crack against the man's ribs. The young man went down with a gasp, and Garrett leveled his blade at the others. "Anyone else want to try?" he asked, his voice cold. "I fought in the wars. I have survived battles you cannot imagine. If you think a dozen farmers with clubs can take me, you are welcome to try, but some of you will not walk away." The men hesitated, clearly reassessing. Then a voice called out from behind Garrett. "You will have to go through both of us." He glanced back to see Elara standing on the porch, her bow drawn and an arrow nocked. Her aim was steady, pointed at Marcus. "This is foolishness," she called out. "I understand your fear and your anger. My people raided your neighbor, and that is wrong. But I am not your enemy. I left my clan because I refused to raid and kill. I came here looking for a different life, and Garrett gave me that chance. If you drive me away or kill me, You will only prove that there is no hope for peace, that orcs and humans can never live together. Is that the world you want? Marcus looked torn, the anger draining from his face to be replaced by uncertainty. We cannot just ignore what happened at Morrison's farm. I am not asking you to ignore it, Elara said. I am asking you to see me as an individual, not as a representative of my race. Judge me by my actions, not by my green skin. Is that not what justice is supposed to be? The standoff held for a long moment, tension crackling in the air. Then Thomas Winters rode up, having apparently followed the mob from the village. He dismounted and positioned himself between the two groups. This has gone far enough, Thomas said firmly. Marcus, you and the others need to go home. What you are doing here is not justice, it is a lynch mob. And Thorne is right, there is a legal process. If you want Elara expelled, take it to the territorial governor. But you do not get to make that decision yourselves. Whose side are you on, Winters? Someone called out. I am on the side of law and order, Thomas replied. My father fought to build a society where disputes were settled by law, not by mobs. I will not dishonor his memory by supporting this. Slowly, reluctantly, the men began to back away. Marcus looked at Garrett with an expression that might have been regret or shame. This is not over, Thorne. People are scared. Something has to be done. Then do something about the raiders who actually attacked Morrison, Garrett said. Form your militia if you must, but go after the guilty, not the innocent. The mob dispersed, and Thomas stayed behind for a moment. You made enemies today, Thorne. Watch yourself. I know, Garrett said, but thank you for standing up for what was right. After Thomas left, Garrett and Elara returned to the house. Elara was shaking slightly, the adrenaline of the confrontation catching up with her. Garrett pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I thought they were going to attack, she said quietly. I thought I was going to have to shoot someone. I know, so did I, but it is over now. Is it? Marcus was right. This is not over. The people of the village will not forget or forgive. We will always be outsiders now, always under suspicion. Garrett pulled back to look at her. Then we will be outsiders together. I do not care what they think, Elara. I care about you, about us, about the life we are building. That is what matters. She searched his face, then nodded slowly. You are right. We cannot control what others think or do. We can only control our own actions. The incident with the mob was a turning point. Word spread quickly about what had happened, and reactions were mixed. Some people in the village were ashamed of what had almost occurred, while others muttered that Garrett should have handed Elara over. But the attempted mob action had clearly crossed a line, and even those who were not comfortable with an orc living among them had to admit that mob justice was not acceptable. In the weeks that followed, Garrett and Elara continued their work on the farm, but they were more cautious now. They kept watch, especially at night, and Garrett made sure his sword was always within reach. There were no more confrontations, but there was a clear division between them and the rest of the community. Then, in early spring, news arrived that changed everything. A delegation from the territorial capital had arrived in the region, sent to investigate the raid on Morrison's farm, and to assess the state of relations between humans and orcs in the area. They would be touring the various settlements, speaking with people, and making recommendations to the governor about policy. Garrett saw an opportunity. We should speak to them, he told Elara. Tell them our story, show them that humans and orcs can live together peacefully. Maybe we can make a difference. Elara was hesitant. They may not want to hear from us. We are exactly the kind of thing that makes people uncomfortable. Which is exactly why our story matters. If we hide away, we let other people define the narrative. If we speak up, we at least have a chance to be heard. After much discussion, they decided to go to the village when the delegation was scheduled to visit. It was a risk, but they both felt it was worth taking. The day of the delegation's visit, Garrett and Elara rode into the village on their wagon. They could feel the eyes on them, hear the whispers, but they kept their heads high. The delegation was holding meetings in the town hall, and a crowd had gathered outside. They waited their turn, and when they were finally called in, they found themselves facing three officials. A stern older woman named Administrator Wright, a younger man named Clerk Daniels, and a guard captain named Pike. All three looked surprised to see an orc and a human enter together. "State your names and your purpose," Administrator Wright said, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp. "I am Garrett Thorne, and this is Elara Jormak," Garrett said. "We came to speak about the relations between humans and orcs in this region, and about the need for a more nuanced approach to integration." "Integration?" Wright raised an eyebrow. "That is an ambitious topic. Go on." Garrett took a deep breath and began to tell their story. He explained how Elara had come to his farm seeking work, how she had proven herself trustworthy and skilled, how they had formed a partnership, and then a deeper relationship. He talked about the challenges they had faced, the prejudice from both sides, but also the success they had found in working together. Elara spoke as well, describing her decision to leave her clan, the difficulty of finding acceptance in human territory, and her hopes for a future where such choices would not be so rare or so difficult. The officials listened carefully, asking occasional questions. When they finished, Administrator Wright sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Your story is unusual," she said finally, "but not unique. We have heard similar accounts in other regions. The question is what to do about it. The treaty between our peoples established basic rules of conduct and territory, but it did not address individuals like Miss Jormak who choose to leave their clans and live among humans. It is a legal gray area, and those tend to cause problems." "Then clarify it," Garrett said. "Establish clear guidelines for orcs who wish to settle peacefully in human territory. Give them a legal path to residency, maybe even citizenship. Create consequences for those who harass or attack peaceful residents, whether they are human or orc." "You make it sound simple," Clerk Daniels said. "But there is enormous political resistance to such policies. Many people see any orc presence as a threat. Many people used to see women as incapable of owning property or conducting business," Elara said quietly. "Many people used to see soldiers from other kingdoms as permanent enemies who could never be trusted. Attitudes can change, but only if leaders are willing to lead." Administrator Wright smiled slightly. "You make a fair point, Miss Jormak. I will include your testimony in my report to the governor. I cannot promise what will come of it, but I can promise that your voices will be heard." As they left the town hall, Garrett felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. They had spoken their truth, but would it make any difference? Only time would tell. The weeks that followed were quieter. Spring planting kept them busy, and they threw themselves into the work with determination. Garrett taught Elara about seed selection and planting depth, and she contributed her knowledge of companion planting and natural pest control. The fields they had prepared began to show green shoots, promising a good harvest if the weather held. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elara spoke suddenly. "I want to marry you." Garrett turned to look at her, his heart jumping. "What?" "I know we cannot marry legally, not under human law or orc custom, but I want to make a commitment, something formal and real. I want us to pledge ourselves to each other, to promise that we are in this together no matter what comes." "I want that too," Garrett said, reaching for her hand. "More than anything. How do we do it?" They spent the next few days planning their own ceremony. It would be private, just the two of them, but no less meaningful for that. They would exchange vows, give each other tokens, and consider themselves married in every way that mattered to them, regardless of what the law said. On a warm spring day, they dressed in their best clothes and walked together to a high meadow on Garrett's property, a place where wildflowers grew and the view stretched for miles. The sky was clear, the sun warm, and the world felt full of possibility. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, and spoke the vows they had written. Garrett went first. "Elara, when you came to my door that rainy night, I was living, but I was not alive. I had forgotten what it meant to hope, to dream, to look forward to tomorrow. You changed that. You showed me that courage is not just facing enemies in battle, but facing prejudice and fear with dignity and determination. You showed me that love is not bound by race or custom, but by choice and commitment. I promise to stand by you, to support you, to face whatever challenges come together. I promise to build a life with you, to share in joy and sorrow, in success and hardship. I promise to see you always as the remarkable person you are." Elara's eyes were bright with tears as she spoke her vows. "Garrett, you gave me more than shelter and work. You gave me hope when I had none. You saw past my green skin and my tusks to the person I am inside. You risked your safety, your standing in your community, your future, because you believed in doing what was right. You taught me that I am worthy of love, worthy of a future, worthy of happiness. I promise to stand by you, to work beside you, to face our enemies and our doubts together. I promise to build a home with you, not just a house, but a place of warmth and acceptance and love. I promise to see you always as the remarkable person you are." They exchanged the tokens they had prepared. Garrett gave Elara a ring he had commissioned from a traveling smith, a simple band of silver engraved with wheat stalks. Elara gave Garrett a braided leather cord worked with beads she had carved herself, in the Orc tradition of bonding gifts. "I consider you my husband," Elara said, sliding the cord around his wrist. "I consider you my wife," Garrett replied, placing the ring on her finger. They sealed their vows with a kiss, long and deep, filled with love and promise. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling through tears. "We are married now," Elara said wonderingly. "By our own law, our own choice." "Yes," Garrett agreed, "and no one can take that away from us." They walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand, and that night they celebrated their marriage in private, with a special meal and too much wine, and the kind of intimacy that came from complete trust and deep love. The summer that followed was perhaps the happiest time in either of their lives. The crops grew well, the animals thrived, and they worked together with the ease of long partnership. The people of the village maintained their distance, but there were no more confrontations. Thomas Winters occasionally stopped by, bringing news or offering to trade goods, and his continued friendship meant more than Garrett could easily express. In late summer, a messenger arrived with a letter bearing the territorial governor's seal. Garrett opened it with trembling hands, Elara looking over his shoulder. The letter informed them that, based on the recommendations of Administrator Wright's delegation, the governor was establishing a pilot program for orc integration in their region. Orcs who wished to settle peacefully in human territory could apply for residency permits, provided they had no history of raiding or violence and could demonstrate means of support. The program would be monitored closely, but if successful, it would be expanded to other regions. Furthermore, the letter specifically mentioned Garrett and Elara's case as an example of successful integration, and offered them formal recognition as a legally bonded household for the purposes of property rights and taxation. It was not full legal marriage, not yet, but it was a start. It was recognition, acknowledgement that their relationship was valid and worthy of legal protection, Elara read the letter 3 times, as if unable to believe it. "They are recognizing us," she said finally. "They are saying we have the right to be together." "It is a beginning," Garrett said. "Maybe just a small crack in the wall, but cracks can widen. This gives me hope, Elara. Hope that the world really can change." They celebrated that night, inviting Thomas and his family to dinner despite the potential social consequences for him. Thomas came, bringing his wife and 2 sons, and they shared a meal that was sometimes awkward but also filled with genuine warmth. Thomas's wife was clearly uncomfortable at first, but Elara's grace and Garrett's happiness gradually put her at ease. As autumn approached again, bringing them full circle to the time when Elara had first arrived, they stood together looking out over their farm. The fields were ready for harvest, the barns were full of supplies for winter, and the house had truly become a home. "A year ago I was alone and desperate," Elara said quietly. "I had no future, no hope, and now I have all of this. I have you, I have a home, I have a life worth living. It seems impossible." "A year ago I was alone and bitter," Garrett replied. "I had a farm but no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me that purpose. You gave me a reason to fight for something better, not just for us but for everyone. You made me believe that change is possible." They worked together through the autumn harvest, bringing in wheat and barley and vegetables. It was hard work, as it always was, but made lighter by their partnership. They hired a few workers from the village, young men who needed the money, and were willing to overlook the fact that they would be working alongside an orc. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. As winter approached again, they prepared the farm for the cold months ahead. They had learned from the previous year, and their preparations were more thorough. They had more food stored, more wood cut, more repairs completed. They were ready for whatever the winter might bring. One snowy evening, as they sat by the fire, Elara placed a hand on her stomach with a thoughtful expression. Garrett noticed the gesture and felt his heart skip. "Lara," he asked carefully. She looked at him, and there was wonder and fear mixed in her eyes. "I think I am pregnant." Garrett felt the world tilt. A child. Their child. The implications were enormous, the challenges undeniable, but beneath the worry was a fierce joy. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Not certain, but I am late and I have been feeling strange. We should find a healer to confirm it, but I think so." He crossed to her and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "How do you feel about it?" "Truly terrified," she admitted. "And happy. And worried about what kind of life our child will have. Will they be accepted by anyone? Will they have friends, a community? Or will they be outcasts like us?" "They will have us," Garrett said firmly. "They will have parents who love them, who will fight for them, who will teach them to be strong and kind and true. And maybe, just maybe, by the time they are grown, the world will have changed enough that they will not face the same challenges we have." Elara smiled through tears. "I hope so. I hope we are building that world for them." Over the following weeks, a traveling healer confirmed Elara's pregnancy. The healer, an older woman with sharp eyes and a practical manner, examined Elara thoroughly and declared her healthy and about 2 months along. "The baby should come in early summer," the healer said. "You will need to be careful, avoid heavy lifting in the later months." "Have you thought about who will assist with the birth?" "I had not thought that far ahead," Elara admitted. The healer considered for a moment. "I will return when your time is near. I have delivered many babies, including a few half-orc children in other regions. They tend to be large and healthy, but the births can be challenging. You will need experienced help." After the healer left, Garrett and Elara talked long into the night about their coming child. They discussed names, argued amiably about whether they hoped for a boy or a girl, and made plans for converting part of the house into a nursery. The fear was still there, the uncertainty about raising a half-orc child in a world that might not accept them, but it was balanced by excitement and hope. Winter passed slowly, and Elara's pregnancy progressed. She remained active and healthy, insisting on continuing to work on the farm despite Garrett's protective instincts. They compromised, with her handling lighter tasks while he took on the heavier labor. Spring arrived, and with it came a letter from Administrator Wright. She was returning to the region to check on the progress of the integration pilot program and wished to visit their farm specifically. Garrett and Elara agreed immediately, curious about what the administrator wanted. When Wright arrived a few weeks later, accompanied only by Clerk Daniels, she spent several hours touring the farm and asking questions about how they managed the work, their relationships with neighbors, and their plans for the future. Her eyes lingered on Elara's now obvious pregnancy, but she said nothing about it until they were all seated for tea. "I want to be honest with you," Wright said finally. "Your case has become something of a symbol in the capital. There are those who point to you as proof that integration can work, and others who point to you as evidence of dangerous miscegenation and cultural contamination. The pilot program is succeeding in some areas and failing in others. But your success here, your genuine partnership and the life you have built, it matters. It gives weight to the arguments for continuing and expanding the program." "We are not symbols," Elara said quietly. "We are just two people trying to live our lives." "I understand that," Wright replied. "But whether you want it or not, you have become important to this process. Which is why I came to warn you. There are forces working against the integration program, people who want to see it fail. They may target you specifically, either to discredit the program or simply out of malice. You need to be careful. We have been careful," Garrett said. "And we will continue to be, but we will not hide or pretend to be something we are not. We are married, we are starting a family, and we have every right to do so." Wright nodded approvingly. "Good. Stand firm in that truth. And know that you have allies in the capital, people who are fighting to make your rights legally recognized and protected." After Wright left, Garrett and Elara discussed her warning. They decided to take extra precautions, to be more vigilant, but also to continue living their lives openly and proudly. They would not be intimidated into hiding. As Elara's pregnancy advanced into her final months, preparation for the baby intensified. Garrett built a cradle, carved with images of both human and orc designs, symbolizing the two cultures their child would inherit. Elara sewed blankets and small clothes, her large fingers surprisingly deft with the needle. Thomas Winters and his wife surprised them by visiting one day with gifts for the baby, practical items like clothing and blankets, but also a beautifully illustrated children's book. "Every child should have stories," Thomas's wife said shyly, "no matter who their parents are." It was a small gesture, but it moved both Garrett and Elara deeply. It meant that not everyone in the community was against them, that some people were willing to look past prejudice and see them as simply a young couple preparing for their first child. Early summer arrived hot and bright, and Elara grew increasingly uncomfortable. The baby was large, just as the healer had predicted, and the heat made everything more difficult. Garrett did everything he could to make her comfortable, bringing her cool water, fanning her on hot afternoons, taking over all the heavy work on the farm. Then, one morning just before dawn, Elara shook him awake. "The baby is coming." Garrett leaped out of bed, his heart pounding. They had prepared for this, had plans in place, but now that it was actually happening, he felt overwhelmed. He helped Elara to the bed they had prepared for the birth, with clean linens and everything the healer had instructed them to have ready. "I need to get the healer," he said. "There is no time," Elara said through gritted teeth. "The contractions are close together. This baby is coming now." Garrett felt panic rise, then forced it down. He had faced battle, had dealt with emergencies before. He could do this. "Tell me what you need." Over the next several hours, Garrett followed Elara's instructions, doing his best to help her through the labor. It was difficult and frightening, seeing her in pain and being able to do so little about it. But Elara was strong, stronger than he had imagined, and she worked through each contraction with fierce determination. Finally, as the sun climbed toward midday, the baby emerged with a sharp cry. Garrett caught the infant carefully, his hands shaking, and looked down at the small, squirming life he held. The baby was perfect. A little girl, with green-tinged skin lighter than her mother's but darker than her father's, with tiny tusks just barely visible and a shock of dark hair. She was crying lustily, her little fists waving, and Garrett felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Is she all right?" Elara asked weakly. "Let me see her." Garrett carefully cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then placed her in Elara's arms. Elara looked down at their daughter with an expression of wonder and love so intense it brought tears to Garrett's eyes. "She is beautiful," Elara whispered. "She is perfect." "She is ours," Garrett said, sitting beside them on the bed and carefully wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. "Our daughter, our family." They decided to name her Emma, a name that worked in both human and orc naming traditions, with a surname that combined both their family names. Emma Jornborn. The healer arrived later that day, having been delayed by an emergency at another farm. She examined both Elara and the baby, pronounced them healthy, and gave them instructions for the coming weeks. She also left them with a gift, a small wooden rattle carved with protective symbols from both human and orc traditions. "She will need all the protection she can get," the healer said quietly. "Being what she is in this world, but she has good parents, and that is worth more than any charm." The first weeks with Emma were exhausting but joyful. She was a good baby, healthy and strong, though she needed frequent feeding and rarely slept for more than a few hours at a time. Garrett and Elara took turns caring for her, learning the rhythms of parenthood together. Word of Emma's birth spread through the region quickly. Reactions were mixed. Some people were curious, wanting to see the half-orc child for themselves. Others were hostile, muttering that the baby was an abomination. But there were also those who sent small gifts or kind messages, and these gestures of acceptance meant everything. Thomas Winters visited with his family shortly after Emma was born. His sons were fascinated by the baby, asking countless questions about her green-tinged skin and tiny tusks. Thomas's wife held Emma carefully, rocking her gently, and there were tears in her eyes when she handed the baby back. "She is beautiful," she said to Elara, "and loved. That is what matters." As the summer progressed, Garrett and Elara settled into their new life as parents. The farm work continued, though at a slower pace, with Elara taking frequent breaks to nurse Emma and Garrett handling more of the physical labor. They were tired constantly, but also happier than they had ever been. One warm evening, as they sat on the porch with Emma sleeping in Elara's arms, Garrett reflected on everything that had changed since that rainy night when Elara had first appeared at his door. "I never imagined this," he said quietly. "When I left the army and bought this farm, I thought I would live and die alone. I thought my life would be about work and survival and nothing more. You changed everything." "You gave me a life when I had none," Elara replied. "You gave me hope and love and a family. I will never be able to repay that." "You do not need to repay anything. We give to each other freely without debt or obligation. That is what love is." As autumn approached and Emma grew stronger and more alert, they received another letter from Administrator Wright. The integration pilot program had been deemed a success, and the governor was expanding it to additional regions. Furthermore, there was movement in the territorial legislature to formally recognize marriages between humans and orcs, giving them full legal status. "It is happening," Elara said, reading the letter with Emma balanced on her hip. "Change is actually happening. Because people like you had the courage to try," Garrett said. "Because you walked away from your clan and sought a different path. Because you refused to accept that orcs and humans had to be enemies." "We did it together," Elara corrected. "I would have had no chance without you, without someone willing to see past the prejudices and give me a chance. That winter was easier than the previous two." They were better prepared, the farm was more established, and they had Emma to brighten even the darkest days. The baby was thriving, growing quickly, already showing signs of the strength and intelligence she had inherited from both parents. Spring came again, and with it came more news. The territorial legislature had passed the bill recognizing mixed marriages. Garrett and Elara could now be legally married, with all the rights and protections that entailed. They decided to have a small ceremony, this time with witnesses, to formalize their marriage under the new law. Thomas Winters agreed to stand as witness, as did the healer who had delivered Emma. Administrator Wright, who happened to be in the region, also attended, her presence lending official weight to the proceedings. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, conducted by a circuit judge who had traveled to the region specifically for the purpose. Garrett and Elara repeated the vows they had spoken to each other in the meadow nearly a year earlier, this time with their daughter present, and with the backing of law and society. When the judge pronounced them married, officially and legally, they felt a weight lift that they had not entirely realized they were carrying. They were no longer just living together, no longer just a couple by their own recognition. They were married in the eyes of the law, and their family was legitimate and protected. The celebration afterward was small but warm. Thomas and his family joined them, as did a handful of other neighbors who had gradually come to accept Garrett and Elara's relationship. They shared food and drink and stories, and for a few hours, it felt like they were just another family celebrating a happy occasion, not a symbol of social change or a test case for integration. As the sun set on their wedding day, Garrett and Elara stood together on their porch, Emma between them in her cradle. They looked out over their farm, their land, their home. "We did it," Elara said softly. "We built a life together. Against all odds, despite all opposition, we made this real." "We did," Garrett agreed. "And we will keep building. For ourselves, for Emma, for whatever children might come after her. We will build a world where love matters more than race, where families are defined by choice and commitment rather than by who society says belongs together." "That is a big dream," Elara said, but she was smiling. "We have already accomplished impossible things," Garrett replied. "Why stop now?" They stood together in the fading light, a human man and an orc woman and their child, a family that should not have been possible, but that had become real through courage and determination and love. They had traded a day's work for shelter, and in doing so, had built a lifetime together. The future stretched before them, uncertain but hopeful. There would be more challenges, more prejudice to overcome, more obstacles to face. But they would face them together, as partners and equals, as husband and wife, as a family. And in facing those challenges, they would help build the better world they dreamed of one day, one choice, one act of courage at a time. The stars came out above their farm, bright and clear, and Emma stirred in her cradle, making the small sounds of a baby settling into sleep. Garrett and Elara looked at each other, and without words they understood. This was what they had fought for. This was what mattered. Not the approval of others, not the recognition of society, though those things were welcome. What mattered was this: family, love, home, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other and would continue choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. They went inside together, closing the door on the night and the world beyond, secure in the warmth of their home and the strength of their bond. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that their dream of a better world was possible. But tonight, they simply enjoyed being together, being a family, being exactly who they were meant to be, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.